Good morning, Sean. Thank you so much for taking the time for this interview today. Halogen Foundation is an established non-profit organization and charity in Singapore with the vision and mission to influence, empower, and transform the young people in Singapore through leadership and entrepreneurship development. We are honored to have with us here today Sean Kong, the Chief Training Officer of Halogen Foundation. Sean has a great heart for youths and the next generation. At Halogen, he oversees curriculum and program design, research in youth trends, and consults with schools to help them achieve their student leadership development goals. Today, let us find out more about youths in Singapore and the passing down of values in the next generation. Sean, can you introduce more about what Halogen does and how you managed to join Halogen?
Hi, Persis. Thanks for having me on this little talk show sort of thing. So a little bit about myself. I think Persis has already done quite a fair introduction about my organization and also about myself. So Halogen was actually started in the year 2003. So we are close to celebrating our 20 years already. And I think back then we started with a very simple vision, right? Like, how can we help young people lead themselves and others well? When the founders started the organization, maybe they just wanted to do good work in the community, right? So they could have started another charitable organization that deals with elderly or poverty alleviation, but they thought that does not give them the multiplier effect. Why not do a youth development organization that raises more young people who would go on to start further kind of social causes, social good, advocate for issues that they care about. So I think that was the original heartbeat of how the founders started the organization. So of course, you'll find that the angle for this is a lot of leadership development, right? How do you help run projects that are meaningful, that they don't fall flat on their face, right? So that was how we started. And I think as we evolved and as we worked with the schools, with the MOE schools over time, we begin to realize beyond just the ideal that we're trying to reach for, there were also a lot of other youth-related issues that are worth addressing, right? So things like personal confidence, self-esteem, growth mindset, how young people deal with failure, and of course, the flavor of today is mental health, right? So there were a lot of all these issues, and I think being an organization that has been in this space for 18 years, we are actually in a good position to address some of these issues through our programs and interventions and working closely with teachers as our partners, right? So I think primarily that's the angle that Halogen has been taking. The output of it is in our programs, on our website, you see that yes, we do leadership programs, we do entrepreneurship programs, we do mentoring programs to try to address some of these issues, right? We run a full range of programs from as young as 10 years old, primary 3, primary 4 students, all the way to students who are preparing to enter into the workforce. So that's what Halogen does. My role is I look primarily and I provide oversight over all of the programs that we run, right? What programs should we be running? What kind of trainers, qualities should we be having? So I lead the teams that run all the different programs.
Wow, thanks for a very comprehensive introduction. So you have a great number of years experience interacting with the youths and in Halogen. So increasingly today, do you see values being passed down to youths more through the families or through external means?
If you ask around, I think people do generally recognize that families, at least from the point of view of a young person, right, is that families are having less influence over the young people's lives as to what values they would adopt. And there are many reasons for this, right? I think back in the 1980s or 1990s, it's less common to have both parents working. So you always have a primary parent figure at home that does the raising up of children and the impartation of values. But I think when you look at the economy today, it's a lot more common to have both parents working, right? So some of these things are outsourced, right? Now, if they have supportive grandparents, that there's still a reasonable level of control, right? We assume that the values that the parents have came from the grandparents, right? So there's some consistency in that, but I don't think all families have that, what I call that privilege of having grandparents support. So sometimes, it gets outsourced to, say, infant care, child care. Some of them make use of their domestic helpers to plug the gap. Yeah.
So, in your opinion, do you think that there is more room for families to play an active role in passing down values to the youths?
I think definitely. Again, that's the ideal, right? I think as far as possible, parents and grandparents should play the primary role of imparting the values. But I think there are practical considerations and challenges that we are trying to work around in this day and age. Technology is a double-edged sword. Back then, there were a lot more opportunities to have values-based conversations because everybody watched the same Channel 8 TV drama. Today, every person has their own screen. There's on-demand streaming. They watch their own things. It's harder to create common topics for conversation. So those conversations, I think, it's not to say that it can't happen, but you have to be a lot more intentional to find those opportunities in this day and age.
So I guess, as what you said, digitalisation is a double-edged sword, and it is more of what tools we use or how youths can actually use social media digitalisation to be more connected with their families.
That's just one part, right? I mean, and that's if youth are comfortable with their parents following them on social media. I think every generation goes through that. Right? I come from the Friendster and Facebook generation. I think when I was on Facebook, my mom was not yet on Facebook. Then of course she only joined Facebook like when I was much older, and I think by then I had a certain level of maturity to accept that, okay, I share this common social media platform with my parents. But when I was in my late 20s, the teenagers that were on Facebook, and then when their parents joined Facebook, they were like, yee, my mom and dad are on Facebook, I don't want, I go and find a different platform. And that's where Instagram came in. All right, then of course when that generation grew up, they matured, and then when they're in their 20s, their parents joined Instagram, they could deal with it. But then when the teenagers were on Instagram, right, and then the parents started being on Instagram, then the same thing happened, like, my mother and father are not on Instagram, so they find other things. So today we have like TikTok and other stuff being the latest trends. So it's almost like playing catch up, and then when you finally caught up, if the kids are too young, they don't feel comfortable sharing that same space. They want that sense of privacy, that kind of thing. So it does have its challenges.
Thank you so much for that insightful reply. So let's move on to the topic of passing down of wealth. Do you see the need for youths to learn about the value of managing wealth passed down from their families today?
That's an interesting question, and frankly, it is not within my domain of expertise. We don't do a lot of financial literacy related kind of programs. But I mean, if you think about the average middle class Singaporean family, right? I think most of them do own like a HDB flat, 4-room, 3-room, 4-room, 5-room, and that would typically be worth, on the lower end, maybe 300k. On the higher end, you have like $1 million HDB flats, right, in your prime areas. So that can be a significant amount that does get passed down, especially if the parents do pass on early, right? Now imagine like a teenager or a 20-year-old inheriting that sum of money. What do they do with it? So I think that kind of education is important to let them know this amount of money that they get, right, whether it's a big or small sum, if you don't put it to good use, it can disappear pretty quickly. But if you put that money to work, it can actually multiply and become a lot more in the longer term. So I think there is an opportunity to teach young people to do that. But of course, touch wood, we don't want them to inherit it when they are so young. We do wish that parents do live a long and meaningful life as well.
So moving on to our final question of the day. I understand one of Halogen's social mission is youth mentoring. In the current COVID era, do you see more opportunities for mentors and youths to be mentored via digital means, or are there any challenges?
I think again, it is a double-edged sword, right? I think the connectivity makes it a lot easier right now to just have virtual face-to-face conversations. Like you don't have to travel half an hour, 1 hour to a central location, to meet a mentor. So there are pros and cons to that. I think one good side is such opportunities are a lot more available and because the demand on both the mentor and the mentee is a bit lesser, right? I don't have to include things like travel time into that. The barrier to entry is lower. The downside to it is sometimes it waters down the value of mentoring relationships, because one of the things that actually make good mentoring relationships work is the effort and commitment that goes into it. So while technology has made some of it easier and more accessible, you have a lot more people signing up for some of these things. The ease of access somehow also makes the quality a little bit watered down if the mentoring relationship is not managed properly. So like you don't find other ways of finding that effort and commitment.
On behalf of Heritance Digital, thank you so much for this very insightful interview and your time today. And we wish you and Halogen Foundation all the very best.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a pleasure, Persis. Wish you all the best also with what you are doing with this Heritance app and also the imparting of values to the next generation.
Thank you.